Hey everyone, today's video is going to be a very chill, chit-chatty kind of recommendation video. I thought we would mix things up and we would be talking about books that I thought were going to be 5 stars, but they weren't. And some of the ones that were 5 stars, and often surprisingly so, I thought it would be a good occasion to bring back some like older books, the ones that I've read in the last couple of years on Booktube. I think it's important to re-include them once in a while, just because it's easy to get sucked into like whatever I'm reading right now, but I want to like mention some of these ones too, because I know it can take a few mentions before you guys pick up a recommendation. So here I am trying to convince you, into picking up some of my favorite books and then talking about the ones that I thought I would really love and just I didn't, so we can commiserate if you feel the same. Let's get to that, but beforehand I wanted to give a special thank you to Established Shadow, the sponsor of today's video. If you don't know, they have a website where you can buy yourself, or someone else, but yourself, a certificate that will be letting you be called a lord or a lady. So you get 1 square footage of land in Scotland and you get your unique plot number. So I am now officially Lady Emily Fox. I can be called like that. I can put that on my credit card if I want to. It makes for a really fun, unique gift. The holidays are approaching. They're currently having their Black Friday sale. So I'll link all the information down below. If you are interested, you can use the coupon code EmilyFox for an additional 10% off. But mostly it's a fun way to continue preserving the forests in Scotland. Because they've committed to planting a tree for every order all over the world, and they work with global charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to support global reforestation efforts. They will be keeping the entire woodland free of any other uses except the peaceful enjoyment of it, and the land will be protected. So once again, if you're looking for a fun last-minute gift, I'll link all the information down below and on the screen. The first 200 people that will be signing up will be able to also be one of my neighbors. They've committed to making us all walking distance, so we'll be able to create our own little books kingdom, Books with Emily Fox kingdom. So the first book, indie, I thought it was going to be a 5-star, but it wasn't. Category, we're gonna go with The Lies of Locke Lamora. I had heard so many things about this series, this first book in this adult fantasy series. I expected it to be a 5 stars. I tend to like accumulate books and leave them on my shelves for years, thinking that I'm going to love them. I just see them as like future joys, and having them just makes me happy. Unfortunately, sometimes they've been there for years, and when I do pick it up, they end up being disappointing. But it's okay. I didn't hate this book, by the way. You follow a group of thieves. They were like orphans, kids. They grew up together, and then they're doing thief stuff. And I really wanted to love this. The writing was quite different from what I expected. I didn't hate it. Once again, it just felt a bit more prosy than a lot of like adult fantasy, and I was emotionally invested in some of the friendships, but I found the plot kind of boring. I don't know if anybody else will agree. It was very, very, very slow paced, and when things get interesting, it still wasn't that, there wasn't that big of a payoff, I feel like, and the ending was just so-so. So for me, this ended up being completely different from what I expected. I did enjoy, again, the friendships between the characters, and I do think that the author wasn't afraid to hurt your feelings, but again, the lack of involvement emotionally just prevented it from really impacting me, especially since it wasn't super action-packed. So for me, it was a bit of a meh. I think I gave it 3.5. Like, again, not a bad rating, just nowhere near the 5 I expected it to be. I do have the second book on my shelf somewhere. I say shelf, but by the way, I'm almost done with the library, so this setting is going to be changing soon. But I have number 2 somewhere on my shelf in a pile, and I want to read it. I've heard it has like pirates, like really cool pirates, so I want to read it. It's been like a couple of years at this point, like 2-3 years at least. So eventually I will get to it, but this was nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. Let's do another one that is a bit more funny. Fangirl, but also attachments, just Rainbow Rowell in general. When I started watching BookTube years ago, this was everywhere. She was everywhere. Her books were everywhere. Everyone loved her. So when I got Fangirl first and then I got Attachment, I expected both of these to be like super solid 5 stars, and they really, really weren't. The first one I read, like I said, was Fangirl, and even my first year on BookTube, I feel like my critiques were less harsh because I didn't have any other books to really compare them to. I hadn't been reading consistently in years, and my expectations weren't super high. Since I hadn't read a bunch of 5 stars, it was hard to rate books at times, but this one, it still made it to my worst / most disappointing books that I had read in 2016. And I stand by that. I would probably be way harsher in my critiques nowadays, but you're following this young girl to YA contemporary, and she's university, she suffers from anxiety, and she has a questionable relationship with this older boy. All of it was awful. The only part I enjoyed was the whole like anxious representation, I guess, but that was it. I didn't care for the story she was writing. Like there was a little bit of a section in the beginning of each chapter. Boring. I didn't skip them. A few people mentioned, oh, I would just not read them. I should have, but I forced myself because I thought maybe there's going to be a payoff by the end. There wasn't. So yeah, didn't care for the older boy also, and just, I felt just very meh. I think my favorite part was the family, which is barely mentioned. So yeah, that was not worth it. And attachments, I made a lot of videos about it, a lot of jokes about this one. This was an adult, not really, but an adult contemporary where there's like this IT guy that falls in love with a girl through stalking her emails with one of her colleagues. That's the nicest way I can put it. But frankly, my conclusion is that if this had been written as a mystery thriller, like horror book, instead of a contemporary romance, there would have been potential, because what he did was freaking creepy, and we were supposed to excuse all of that creepiness because he was hot. He lived with his mom, and she made his lunches, and he had multiple degrees, but like he stalked her. We're supposed to just let that go. So yeah, this was not 5 stars either. If it had been a thriller book, maybe, but when I heard people say, oh, this is so romantic, where? Are you okay? So yeah, Rainbow Rowell, after these 2 books, pretty sure those are the only 2 that I read by her. I will not read anything else by her. She's clearly not for me. But yes, I went into them so hyped because I kept hearing everyone rave about her, but she just turned out not to be an author for me. So definitely not 5 stars. One that I did really enjoy in my first year of Booktube, I went back because I thought it was really fun. Flowers for Algernon. I went into that one knowing nothing. So my expectations weren't too high because I knew it was like a classic, like modern classic, and I knew there was a mouse, but that was it. I was not prepared for the emotional wreck this was going to like do to me. So good. 5 stars. Clearly, it's in that category. But yes, you're following, I think it's Charlie, and he's writing journal entries trying to follow up his progress because he's put on like a medication that they tested on a mouse, Algernon, that made the mouse smarter, and he has a lower IQ, so they're like testing that medication on him, and you're just following his progress. And I almost cried. I don't cry easily, but ooh, that one hurt. And again, we're like 6 years later, I still think about this book constantly. I still recommend it constantly. It's like a really solid recommendation too. Like I would say like 95+% of people will enjoy this, and I loved it. But again, I went into it with no expectation, so it just really blew my mind. So I don't want to say more about the premise, but so good. I understand why it's raved about so much. Like if I were to ever do a video like life-changing books, you know, those really dramatic titles, this would be in there. So since we're talking about books that are raved about constantly, let's talk about ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Okay, Sarah J. Maas is everywhere. Let's just talk about her in general. I have read the first 3 books in this series, and then I read the first 2 books in the Throne of Glass series. I really, really tried to love her. My favorite by her is the 2nd book in this series, which overall, huge improvement. Questionable sex scenes. Why is everyone growling? But it was very matchy-matchy by the end of that one. And then the 3rd book was, it suffered from like middle book syndrome. I went into it thinking it was the last book in a trilogy, and it wasn't. Anyway, but book 1, it had been compared to like Hunger Games a little bit and like romance, but like I was waiting for things to get good the whole time, and somehow continued because of the hype. And like I said, book 2 was better, but still. And then I tried Throne of Glass. I did a whole video reading it, kind of bashing it, to be honest. Just nothing happens. It's just a lot of fluff and like romance/sex scenes, which like fair, but like not my cup of tea, not what I had heard. Basically, all of her stuff just doesn't work for me. It feels like I used to read a lot of books like that from the hype on Booktube, where it's like it's YA fantasy, but really it's romance in a fantasy world, which is fine. It just, I don't like to switch up. Like, don't tell me it's a fantasy book, you know? Like Throne of Glass, for example, my biggest issues is that you were told that she was like such an assassin. And then book 1, she doesn't do the whole time. Like the whole time, there's a lot of like telling but not showing. And then book 2 happens, same thing. And you're like, where's the greatest assassin of all time? Like, where is it? So yeah, was not a fan of her work. Again, I think that if I had been told it's romance in a fantasy world, probably would have worked better. But I think that at that point I was just over it. I get secondhand embarrassment very easily when I read sex scenes because all I can think of is the author alone writing them and be like, oh, that's good. And I'm like, no, stop. So it's on me. It's fair. She's just really not for me. You're not going to see me read more by her. I know everyone has been like talking about it, but I am so done. I'm so done. I've tried. Just not for me, which is okay. Ooh, one that surprised me to this day that I liked it, and sometimes I'm scared to reread older favorites because what if I don't like them anymore? I'll give you the Sun. This is a YA contemporary, which I don't read a ton of because generally they don't work for me, but this one was a 5 stars. You're following twins and their narration flip-flop between chapters, but one of them is like 3 years ago when they are like super close, and then the other one is 3 years later when they don't speak and you don't know what happened and you're just following them. It's like coming of age for both of them, and they've lost their mom, so like it's obviously very difficult on them and you're just seeing them grow up. And at first I was really invested in the story of the boy, but then by the end I really liked also the story of the girl, and it's just so good. The writing is very heavy-handed on the like metaphors and like very lyrical, so I think that's usually the main complaint. But because I don't read a ton of books like that, I wasn't too tired of the style, I guess. So it just worked. It just worked. But I'm definitely scared to reread this because what if? But if you know someone that is younger and that loves YA contemporary, read this. It's great. I really liked it. Ooh, let's talk about Jane Austen because I have mentions for both categories. Let's go with the ones that I thought I was going to love, but I didn't. Persuasion and Northanger Abbey. Let's talk about them both at the same time. I thought they were going to be 5 stars, but they both ended up being like 2.5, 3. I was shocked because, you know, when you think that this author, I will give 5 stars to everything. That was Jane Austen in my head. As soon as I read Pride and Prejudice, I was like, genius. But these two, the romance was just not that great. I wasn't rooting for them. I think I was also kind of expecting a strong female characters like in Pride and Prejudice and Emma, and it's just not the case. They let people walk all over them. I found that the stories were like things would jump from one part to the other. Like even I think it's Northanger Abbey that was like described as being like gothic, and like part 2 yes, but part 1 no. And I just wasn't invested. Again, the romance, the story, she's still great at like writing. Her writing is great. I wish I could speak like that. She's great, a little too good really, at creating like annoying, hateable characters, like the enemies of the main characters. But I wasn't invested. I found the movie of Persuasion better than the book, probably because once again it felt a bit disjointed, and I feel like the movie makes things a lot clearer for me. Might be the unpopular opinion, but yeah, they were my 2 least favorite books that I've read by her so far. But on the flip side, Emma, I ended up really enjoying it. I read the book, then I watched, it was the movie, the modern one and the older one. I watched 2 and enjoyed both of them. I find that yes, the main character is a bit sillier than Elizabeth from Pride and Prejudice, but I still find her very strong, and for some reason I think that the author is really good at doing that. Generally speaking, she's also really great at writing sisters, like relationships between sisters. I just finished Sense and Sensibility, and even though it wasn't a favorite, I really liked the friendship between Eleanor and Marianne, the 2 sisters. Although once again, the romance wasn't on point. I think I just like her for a romance. I need to just admit that to myself. But yes, Emma took me by surprise. I really ended up enjoying it. I was super invested. And again, the adaptations are great too, but the book was a 5 stars. Another book that I thought was going to be a solid 5 and it wasn't, would have to be Raven Boys. Also YA contemporary. Is it fantasy, I would say? Maybe magical realism. I thought I was going to love it because the hype on Booktube, everyone loves this series, everyone. And I tried to read the whole series in one reading vlog and I gave up after book 3 because I couldn't take it anymore. I understand why people love the series, the characters, right? And I do like them. I was definitely emotionally invested in them, especially the family of the main female character. Her family, the witches. I wanted the whole series to be about them. Like Persephone, I want to know more about her. She's the coolest one. Like, who cares about the rest of the story? Which is my point. I think that the characters were great, the story boring, so boring. I don't care about the lines or whatever they were looking for. Did not care whatsoever. That's why I didn't even finish it. And like, when you only have one book in a series left and you have still the big question, you would think you would force yourself, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So yes, unfortunately, the whole series for me was like 3.5. I felt generous, but it was not a 5 stars. And although, again, I understand the hype because the characters are likable, I still don't understand why they were like 5 stars for everyone. So for me, it was a flop. Not awful, just really not a favorite, but one that was. So in the category of books that surprisingly were 5 stars for me, The Sword of Kaijin. I had this book as a Kindle, like ebook on my Kindle, for over 2 years by the time I finally got around to reading it. Why did I keep forgetting? I mean, to be fair, I do forget about the books on my Kindles quite often. It's easy to forget them if you don't consistently read books on there. But this is an adult fantasy series. It's just standalone, which is a big plus. I feel like there aren't enough of them, and it's not overly big either. It's a fairly quick read, and it's just so interesting. Definitely give yourself the first half to get really fully invested in the story, but you're following this woman and her family. She grew up in a pretty progressive family. She went to school to learn, you know, fighting magic, and then she marries into a very conservative family with very conservative husband in like this remote village where she will be raising her family there. And you're following, like I said, her husband, their son. He is trying to, you know, find his place in the world, and they end up having to defend, not their country. What is it when it is an emperor? Their land, whatever. You get what I mean. And that's what you're following. I ended up being really frustrated in the first half with the main female character because, you know, she's supposed to be coming from a very progressive family, but then she's like letting people walk all over her, which again, fair enough because they're very conservative. But I ended up being so emotionally invested once again. I really cared about them. The magic system was really interesting, and my heart hurt a lot. And you know when you finish a standalone and you're like, I kind of wish it wasn't a standalone, even though you usually complain that you want more standalone? This book is a great example. They're actually currently doing a Kickstarter to print a physical copy of it because this was self-published. So if you're interested in getting your own physical copy, but yes, this was fantastic. Easy 5 stars. One book I thought I was going to give 5 stars, I was super excited, was Upgrade by Blake Crouch. I should have known better because my relationship with his work is like, his older work, kind of questionable. But anything past the Wayward Pines series, which the concept was really cool, but I still had issues with it. But everything else, dark matter, recursion, strong thriller sci-fi. I recommend them constantly. So whenever this one was coming out, I was like, I'm pre-ordering it. I feel like this is going to be a new favorite. It was once again a thriller sci-fi, and it was just such a letdown. I can't say too much about his work because I feel like the least you know, the more of a chance you have to enjoy them. But like I said, you're following a main character who gets involved into something he didn't really want to, and it affects him a lot, and you just, you know what, I'm not saying anything else because you don't want to know. But yes, I thought this was going to be 5 stars and it was like a 3, maybe 3.5. It just was kind of boring to me. To be fair, it does contain some tropes that I'm not a fan of, but it would be a spoiler. One that I really didn't think was going to be 5 stars was The Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time, which some people might be like, how did you think you weren't going to like this? This is such a popular adult fantasy series. That's the reason. It was published, I think, in 1990. When I read it, I was about to take a break from fantasy because I was so tired of the really popular adult fantasy written by men being super sexist, and like nobody tells you, you pick it up and you're like, again, you know? Like you try to focus on everything else, but like it's constant, so it's annoying. So I picked it up kind of tired of adult fantasy and I ended up really liking it. At least book 1, there wasn't sexism. I mean, there are a bunch of books in the series, so it's possible that happens later on. I will eventually continue, so I'll be able to know. But book 1 was great. I was really invested. Matt, you freaking little doo-doo head, always causing issues. I liked how, like, the 3 main male characters all had, like, a very distinct storyline, which was interesting. I liked that in that world, the women are the ones that have the magic, and like it seems intriguing. We're gonna get more info with that later on. And I think the weakest point was probably the ending, which we'll see again. It's the first book in a really long series. I did try to watch a TV show and it sucked. It sucked. I never finished season 1. We'll never finish season 1, but yes, Book 1 surprisingly ended up running it up to a 5. It was definitely worth the hype. Another book that I thought I was going to give 5 stars to, but really wasn't, was Inhalation. Adult sci-fi, the first book in the series. I was so ready. I love sci-fi. I love weird books, but this one, it just ended up working for me. You're following this woman who is sent part of a crew to explore this kind of dome of things happening. It seems to be growing, and they're trying to go and explore to figure out what's going on. And it's like kind of implied it might be aliens. Book 1, I finished book 1 and it's not mentioned, so it's not a spoiler. I appreciated how the author gives no name to anyone. They were named like the biologist or like, you know, so it's very weird and strange. The vibes was definitely super creepy. Like when they're going down the tower, keeping this vague, I was really uncomfortable. And I feel like not enough books manage to do that. Like even the one that are like horror books, they just don't really work. This one, I was like reading from the corner of my eye, like don't do it. So it was good for that. But otherwise, it just was too strange, too vague. It's a fairly short book, like 200 something pages, and I just didn't feel invested, and I didn't end up continuing the trilogy, so that gives you an idea also. But yeah, I just thought I was going to love this a lot more than I did. I watched a movie, and I feel like it gives you a good idea of like how weird it is, although it was satisfying to see things visually. But yeah, once again, wasn't super invested. So yeah, good idea, just wasn't for me. Another one that shocked me that I gave it 5 stars was this book, actually. It's right here. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I've been trying to rave about this as much as possible because I read it last year, and I'm trying to read the whole trilogy because I've been really bad at finishing series. But this took me years. Like I grew up with people reading it, and I usually read every book that was popular that everyone was reading. And this one I was just, no interest, even though I knew nothing about it. And I should have read it because this was so good. I am someone that really enjoys murder mysteries on like, you know, not secret, like a location no one, it has to be someone on, you know, in that room, on that island in this case. And part of the book is about that, which if I had known, you're following this journalist. He's usually like a financial journalist. So in the beginning, it seems to be like, why am I reading this book? Continue, force yourself. And then you get to that section where he's paid a lot of money to try to solve a murder mystery that happened years ago, where like it was a family mostly that was on an island, and one of them disappeared. Someone, you know, murdered that person, and he has to figure out who, because this man is about to die and doesn't want to leave all of his money to, you know, a murderer. So he's trying to piece things together while other things are going on, so it will become a series. But book 1 was so good. Easy 5 stars. Didn't see anything coming. I was very invested. And again, even though it's a murder mystery investigation, when it's like in a small town, it gives me cozy vibes. And it works for me. So yes, love that one. One that I was sad that I didn't end up giving it 5 stars would have to be Senlin Ascends. I read that one last year, and it made it to my most disappointing books of the year because I thought this was going to be the easiest 5 stars. This is another example of an adult fantasy that was on my shelf for years because I thought I was going to give it 5 stars. So grabbed it when I thought I needed it, and such a flop. I don't understand why people love it. The idea sounds interesting, but when I mentioned sexism, you found this much older man that is dating his basically student from a small town school, and they go on a honeymoon to the Tower of Babel, where they will, you know, go up trying to explore. And then she basically is kidnapped, disappears, and that's how he starts his journey. So the whole like woman in the fridge trope, something horrible happening to a female character in order for the male character to start his journey. That's how the book starts, which like wasn't a good start for me. But then things after the second level get so boring. Like my interest never came back, and it's like not even like halfway point. So like I was bored the whole time. There was absolutely no way I was going to read 3 more books because he continues going up the tower. I didn't care. So yeah, good thing I didn't buy the rest of the series, but yes, I thought I was going to love this, and I really, really didn't. This video is starting to be long, but there is one more I want to give a recommendation because I don't feel like anyone is picking it up. You need to. If you like adult sci-fi and you're not too big on necessarily like deep characters, because the character development could have been a bit better, but Spin. When I put that on screen, people were like, nope, next, they're skipping ahead. Don't skip ahead. This is one of the best sci-fi I have read. It doesn't look like it. It's definitely giving like strong like classic sci-fi vibes from that cover, but the concepts are mind-blowing. It's not quite three-body problem level, but it's still some really interesting sci-fi concepts that are part of it. I want more books like this, basically. But yes, the characters sucked. I mean, in the three-body problem, they sucked even more. But the way the story starts, you have this teenage boy who is with two friends, a boy and a girl. They're looking at the stars, and then they disappear. That's how it starts, and I don't want to say anything else, actually. There are just some really interesting science-y concepts in here, so if you're looking to read more adult sci-fi and you're not too picky on deep characters, I would highly recommend this. This is technically the first book in a series. I never continued because I had heard that they weren't that great, and this book stands really well on its own. Eventually I will, but it's been a couple years now, but like 3 or 4 years, but I will continue, but if you like adult sci-fi, give it a shot. I know how it looks, but give it a shot. I think that's enough. We're gonna stop here for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section what books you thought you were going to give 5 stars to that ended up being a complete flop, and then which ones ended up surprising you and being 5 stars. Also, if you have an opinion about any of the books that I've mentioned, feel free to talk about them in the comment section. We can discuss them. And I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, including I did a video all about lowest rated books that I've read from Goodreads that I agree or disagree with the people. And also include my wrap up for the month of October if you want to see how it went. And I will see you in an upcoming video very soon. Bye.